My guest tonight is Zach Haller. I am pleased to welcome back the shirtless pundit. He's got a shirt on tonight, so that's a good thing. How are you, Zach?
I'm good. How
Good
about
to
you,
see
man?
you. I'm doing very well, It's been a while since we've had you on the show, and I must say, I missed you, my friend. You had a really good episode last night, and I was reminded that I needed to bring you back on the show after I saw a great article that you had last week on Medium.com. And for people who are maybe not familiar with Zach, you should definitely be following him on Twitter. He's the shirtless pundit, as I said. You can follow him at Zach Haller. Haller. Damn it, I will get that right. Haller. It's easy, everyone. I can't screw it up. Now, the Medium article is about this expanding Spygate scandal. And Zach, if my memory serves correctly, like me, you were also an Obama voter at the time and felt the need for hope and change. We maybe were a little bit let down, but fill us in on what's going on in what was once regarded as a scandal-free administration. What have you learned? What were you writing about in this Medium article that people can find?
Well, it is a loaded, it's a loaded article. A lot has been kind of breaking open in the news recently. We're learning kind of about the kind of real logistics of the surveillance operation that was inside the Trump campaign that went into the presidential campaign. We all have known that something's been going on. We in independent media have been watching in real time as we saw what the Obama administration was doing to try and protect Hillary Clinton, sabotaging Bernie Sanders beyond that. So it's like we saw this all in real time. We're getting updates. We're getting closer to this the Inspector General report on the FBI's corruption from the 2016 election. And basically, I just, people who follow my writing know I just try to get as much information out there about what's going on as possible because it's a really, really expansive scandal. It's mind-boggling to think of the depth, as everyone in your audience knows. But basically, Spygate is what it's been called. There was some talk of it being Obamagate, but Spygate is basically this first kind of introduction that we know that Stefan Halper, who has ties to the CIA and M16 in Britain, was planted in the Trump campaign very deliberately. All of Obama's administration know about it. Basically, we're kind of now realizing, oh, look, a human spy. We're finding out there's going to be multiple, but here are what the logistics were last year when everyone was campaigning, and the FBI at the time, without telling Trump, it's just this really insane thing. But we are learning about the operation that was in the Trump campaign, how it was in direct conflict with the FBI's own rulebook, and how there were media disclosures that were coming out throughout this process, which is part of how the whole fabricated Russia-Trump collusion narrative was started to initiate that FBI investigation into Trump. While Clinton had 3 going on, wanting to distract from her 3, cut those off, and start one on Trump, so she wasn't the only presidential candidate under FBI investigation during the election.
I mean, you're right, but I'm laughing. I'm showing GCHQ headquarters right now, Zach, because I think the American people, or at least I feel like our audience and your readers are learning a lot more about how some of these clandestine operations work. Obviously, there are laws in place, and whether or not they're being followed is another question, but there are laws in place to prevent the United States clandestine agencies, hopefully, from spying internally on U.S. citizens. And what we've learned is that it seems to be a fairly common practice for the United States to ask its allies to sort of, you scratch our back and we'll scratch yours. So we're learning about this, and you're in a really unique position because you're kind of a conservative writer. I mean, you started as a progressive with Bernie Sanders, but you are somewhat supporting Trump, right?
I'm supporting progress and moving forward. It's like I get really bothered by this whole concept that people need to identify by national politics when we have all these different things that need to get done.
True.
I support the progress that has gotten accomplished in a lot of ways. There's a lot that's not happening. There's a lot of bad things happening. I have a very constructive approach to it. I think that, the labels are annoying.
Well,
but
the
yeah,
thing
there
I'm
has
getting
been a
at
lot of
is
progress.
you're right there in California, and I used to live in Los Angeles. You're in Northern Cal, I
Seattle.
think. Seattle.
I'm in
Sorry,
Seattle.
dude. I
Yeah.
got to get my research better
I
over
know I
here.
need to get you
But
an
you
info
did live
card.
in San Francisco at some point, didn't you, or somewhere in Silicon Valley or something?
No. I've been
I'm
in Seattle the
sorry.
last 4 years.
So what's the
So
climate like in Seattle? When I talk to people in California, you say the letter T. You can't even get Trump out without people killing you.
it's really stressful, honestly. But it's getting better. I think that people are seeing kind of some improvements in the quality of their lives, and they're realizing that it wasn't as apocalyptic as the
Right.
media said it was. So I think that there's that's helping, but Washington's its own corrupt state for all its reasons. So it's just you know here most we're dealing with these massive businesses that put so much money into Washington, Seattle politics, and
Well,
we should stick
Boeing,
to
of
Spygate
course.
because I could get on a tangent about Seattle.
But we're going to talk about it because it is important because, we're talking about the military-industrial complex. We're talking
Yeah.
about, Spygate involves all of this stuff. There are corporate interests, there are, international globalist interests. And
Yeah.
Boeing, of course, was critical to Seattle. It moved when they merged with McDonnell Douglas. What's going on in Seattle as far as this type of stuff is concerned?
Well, I mean, Amazon is growing like it's insane. And anyone that's in Seattle is going to tell you the city is changing so fast. There's so much investment money coming in, building buildings before the people are here. Amazon's got these huge, 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 just, mountains of people coming in. They're building up. It's lots of people getting displaced. It's a weird climate because of the very kind of advanced growth in the high tech sector. But our homelessness problem is serious, getting worse, and we don't have affordable housing for the vast majority of people here. So Seattle's got that tension, and the Democratic Party locally here has a lot of control. Basically all of these big companies, Microsoft, Boeing, Amazon, buy out our senators are worthless because they're completely tied to the Hillary Clinton talking points. So with Amazon, it's like we're looking at this. Okay, we've clearly been seeing, as you said before, and as we talked about in Spygate, the United States government and Barack Obama have basically been abusing their spying and surveillance apparatus for as long as we've had the internet. All of these big tech companies conglomerated around the Democratic establishment because they've all been working together on this. Our privacy rights have just been completely trampled on, and that's all basically what happened over the course of the whole last 10 years. And now we're dealing with the fact that this was growing. Now we've got a new administration trying to tackle what has been very corrupt work and liaisons between big tech and the Democratic Party and the U.S. government. Google is getting exposed. I hope that more people become conservative in the sense that I don't consider myself conservative at all, but obviously in the general concept of using politics to improve our problems, you have two viewpoints you can look at it from. You can look at it the liberal viewpoint, the conservative viewpoint. If both sides have a good idea, use the best solution from whichever. Right now, because of the failures of democratic and liberal politics, we need a lot more conservative solutions to address the problems that we've been in under this democratic administration that obviously was more corrupt than any in history and had the technical capacity, technology to expand these surveillance programs that now are in someone else's hands. I don't think anyone should trust the new administration to begin with, but I think the most important thing that everybody knows is it doesn't matter if you like the current president or not. Everyone hopefully can agree that we don't want the incoming president to be spied on in a strictly political manner based on false evidence. Anyone, especially people who don't like the current president, should be making sure that this scandal is addressed properly, because if they want someone to replace the current president, this can't happen again.
Right. We need to definitely make sure that our electoral process is not overrun, as you said, by all these corporate interests. So that's, again, I should have been more in tune with your geography there. Amazon is critical, of course. They had that $600 million cloud data services contract with the CIA that has now gone to Oracle. But I sort of feel like, that's just like taking it out of one pocket and putting it in the other. Are these companies really that different? Why do we have our clandestine agencies' data being handled by a company that also knows, how frequently you're buying dental floss and everything about you? These big data mining operations, whether it's Amazon and your purchasing habits. Of course, a lot of people are watching movies on Amazon. They can learn quite a lot about what you're liking, what you're reviewing from books, what you're reading, etc. And there's all these things that you sign up for through these other accounts. So clearly they're embedded in everything.
Yep, it's really scary. And, there's so much to be kind of taking in terms of all the news that's coming out. It's exhausting to think about it, but that's part of the reason, Washington in general is a very progressive state, and people are very productive about participating in society here. So that's part of the reason why I live here, is because it's really scary how out of control the surveillance and basically just like everything you ever do on your phone is getting swept up.
Right.
And sometimes I'm just like, I see these ads coming in on these targeted ads that are coming in that don't even relate to anything that I need, but apparently my phone just heard me talking about them, and
right.
So now they're in my news feed, and I'm actually like looking for things to do, and then I just missed a good concert last weekend, and I'm like, okay, where was my smartphone and creepy ads for telling me about that concert that I just missed? Like, that would have been actually useful. But the people that are, gosh, it's just developing in such a just reckless way that things are moving, basically taking too much and then apologizing for it, and it's too late. I'm
right.
hoping that there's going to be a breakup of big tech as we see some enforcement of the, schemes that have been going on in these corrupt tech companies. Hopefully that will coincide with some breaking up of these huge tech monopolies, and that can be a good first step to starting to correct some of the abuse of our data. I know Europe is, it's going to be interesting to see what different laws affect the way these big companies have manipulated our data. Gosh, I can't wait to see Mark Zuckerberg back testifying before Congress. We have a few more questions for Zuckerberg.
Where he apparently lied. You've been all over this FISA thing, and that's actually a big part of what our previous conversation was. So you've got a good handle on what's been going on since the beginning. There are some new players who have come about, but it's amazing to me that they've just been, harping on these same issues, and there has just been where is the photograph of Donald Trump meeting with Putin at the Holiday Inn in Moscow? Where is the testimony from these prostitutes who allegedly urinated on a bed? As you said, they basically made up a story, which I've seen happen in other venues, and then based on that story, they create a document, and then that document gets submitted somewhere. And see, what's happening, I believe, Zach, is that they're moving you further and further away from the steaming, stinking pile. Like if I tell you, hey, Hooker's pissed, it's like, well, wait a minute, how do you just make that up? But if I write it down and then submit that document in court, I can say, a document's been submitted in a federal lawsuit that says that Hooker's pissed. Now, it's true that the document was submitted, but we don't know if the original content of the statement of that document has been verified. So it becomes so convoluted by the time it comes out the other end that people like Dan Feinstein or whatever say, well, it's a foregone conclusion that Russia hacked, when that's never actually been established.
I have like 3 tabs open. Fortunately, most people can sense the scam. I think most of us who read the dossier when it came out immediately were like, okay, if it's BuzzFeed, obviously it's not legitimate. It was completely unsourced. People know if there's a substantial allegation, obviously there will be legitimate source material for it. If there's an absence of one, people aren't stupid. Secondly, the there's so many paradoxes, so many huge catch-22s to this whole thing where they're like, oh, Russia hacked us. It's like, all right, step back for a second, Barack Obama. Nice work admitting that, like, basically the most important thing that happened is you protected the sanctity of our election. You blew it. You blew it. Okay, so if you admit that, that's one catch-22. But this other catch-22 about all of their all of the evidence that they're using is fake. It's falsified. It's political opposition research. The fact that they had to make stuff up actually lends a lot of credibility to the fact that Trump is completely innocent. Right. Obviously not. They could be drilling on scandals that could get closer to Trump crimes if they had good evidence behind it. They don't. And that's kind of like wait a second. If you haven't found something after all this time, why is that?
Exactly.
And it's interesting. It kind of, exonerates him in a way because they haven't had anything substantial. They've had all this time to do it when everybody understands that this is not an actual real national security concern. It's a made-up situation. While we see Venezuela, we see China, we see all of these things happening, North Korea, we know what real big events are going on in the world. They're just bluffing this whole thing because they obviously have nothing actual tangible to work with. And that completely incriminates them. They just talk about it in a way that tries to act like they don't realize that. But they're complete idiots with all their messaging.
It is quite interesting. I mean, you bring up North Korea. That's obviously, it's a huge problem. And I mean, certainly we recall under Bill Clinton, North Korea was initially nuclearized, and then we had George W. talking about how they were part of the axis of evil, Barack Obama talking about how they were hacking stupid Sony movies, and that we would, take our revenge at a time and place of our doing. I personally am very hopeful that Donald Trump can do something positive with North Korea. I mean, I agree that Trump is frequently saying things that are, let's say, coarse and could be better stated, but it's sort of like, if someone is a dick, for lack of a better term, at least if they're working for you, that could be good,
Yeah, it's just, to me, it's just like, how are we being part of the solution? And, everyone in their own hometowns, like here in Seattle, it's like, okay, if I really don't like my representative, if I actually want to get something done, to some extent, I might actually want to have a reconciliatory relationship with that person, because that will maybe allow me to find common ground, even though I dislike that person. That's, to me, like the constructive attitude that people should have about politics, about their elected officials, and about our policymakers as they are trying to actually move toward peace. You can't just be so angry all the time. You actually have to have you have to be part of the solution if you want to ever get to a solution. And seeing all of the Democrats and basically the entire peace, entire anti-war party have nothing to do with the developments in North Korea. Obviously, a lot has to go, but we're seeing gears moving in place. There is progress that's been made, and so many people can't even admit that it's being made. It's like, do you really actually care about this cause if you can't reconcile the fact that there is progress that has never happened after all these past administrations?
Right. It's not no, you're hitting the point exactly, Zach, because as I look at this Reuters article here, it seems to echo what we've been hearing the whole time. If Barack Obama had entered into some peace conversation with North Korea, it would just be like, rose petals and flowers shooting out of cannons. And here, all I'm seeing is negativity, that Trump's summit may bring peace, but at a cost. It's like, oh, it's not that good, Obama loosened it for you or something like that. They can't give the man any credit or even positive encouragement to move the thing in the right direction.
Well, and look, I'm all about smart criticisms of the president. Please, the more, the merrier. We need all of that. These criticisms that most people have are irrational, or they're, like you said, they're phrased in a way that makes it like illegitimate in terms of this doesn't seem like it could even be a reasonably objective analysis of this situation that I'd love to have an informed opinion on, but I'm clearly not getting it if the headline is clickbait. And that's what we're seeing and that's part of what, helped contribute to Twitter's role in this election. But part of what the internet and the new social media the way you get people's attention and the way you get lots of page views is you say negative things, you bully, you do these things. If unfortunately, a lot of people starting up on YouTube realize people watch their videos because they're like hate watching it, right? Sometimes people love to hate it, and any press is good press. So it's like we've got this mainstream media and so many people commenting on it that aren't even getting constructive criticisms of the president. They hate him so much they can't think clearly and actually say a productive critique, because we need to line up all the productive critiques and get all of the good people behind them, because obviously there are more tasks than we can even count in terms of reforming the government in the way that it needs to go. So, it's just so frustrating to see these irrational outbursts and this rage, this constant diluted blind rage, because it's like, please take it to a local representative that actually can help your neighborhood, or find a way to report on this objectively so you can get people behind the issue if it's real. And if it's not, if there's not some real basis in your outrage, what's the problem?
Right. And that's what I like about what you're doing. You've taken things into your own hands, at least from a journalistic standpoint. You're writing on Medium, you're helping people understand this stuff. I mean, and other places, of course, Twitter, you're very big. There's a lot of players involved, and we've been hearing a ton about Stefan Halper. What is happening with him? What is it that you're covering in this article from just last week, May 31st? What are we going to see happen to any of these guys? We've heard a lot about Paul Manafort, but Halper's a relatively new name in this cocktail of craziness.
Yeah, and there are some people in alternative media that were reporting on him during the election, because it was an odd situation. Some of these, the revolving door of the Trump campaign, because they always wanted to make it a big deal anytime someone joined or left. So Stefan Halper basically is, basically been outed as a spy during the campaign. And, the article, it tries to explain the concept of what a spy is. We've got a national surveillance apparatus, international, there's all these rules, it's very complex. Tries to kind of itemize the fact that here we have the specific individual that is part of the broader scheme to sabotage the Trump campaign. This is how it happened. I link out a lot to try and skim the surface to get through it, but basically we have to kind of put it all in perspective that right now what we need to be thinking about is reforming the department, the law enforcement agencies that were corrupted, the Department of Justice and the FBI. First thing we do is we're looking at the people who led those organizations. These people need to, obviously Comey is going through it right now. He's going to be one of the first in the IG report. So this is part of the bigger scheme of the FBI needs to be audited. What the Inspector General is doing. That's kind of, the article is kind of putting the breaking news about Stefan into the bigger picture, that the FBI and DOJ audit is the first step toward kind of understanding the way that the U.S. government was corrupted.
Right. And I mean, I personally was quite surprised that Andrew McCabe was removed from the FBI. And of course, we're seeing James Comey come under great scrutiny. So that actually gives me some hope that something might happen. I know it's very easy to sort of slip into this mode of feeling like it's going to be the same old, and nothing is ever going to happen. It's surprising to me that Donald Trump hasn't removed Jeff Sessions yet, but it feels like this DOJ Inspector General memo, it's like getting a kitchen remodeled. It's always coming in 2 weeks. What the hell is going on with that thing?
Yeah, I mean, they're stonewalling like they stonewall literally everything.
Do we have any idea why that is?
I mean, it's just the same thing that's been blocking Hillary's emails from getting released. It's the same corruption that's still just throwing wrenches in everything possible. Horowitz himself was trying to conduct these probes, but Obama's administration was stopping the IG from doing his audit in every possible way. They put up every possible obstacle. Fortunately, in the new administration, the Inspector General was finally able to start even doing his job. So there's so much stonewalling going on that we're seeing. Fortunately, we've got the, Hubert going for the kind of criminal prosecutions based on whatever's being recommended by the IG. We know they've expanded into the State Department. We're seeing more depth of each of these different kind of elements of it. And we're also seeing progress in terms of the AG in New York was very corrupt, obviously was removed. Immediately thereafter, Harvey Weinstein has been arrested and is facing very serious charges.
Yep.
And there's obviously a lot of, human trafficking progress and stings that are happening. There's a lot going on. And basically, I guess I'm digressing a bit, but, people just need to keep staying informed, focus on this IG report that's coming out. Yes, we can keep demanding it, but we're getting more bits and pieces. Obviously, Priestap was interviewed for, I think, 6 hours today, testified, who was, the boss of the FBI agents that, were conducting the illegal operation. Peter Strzok's role, people were learning more about that. So it's basically just the web is widening. Yes, obviously, some people are going to get out scot-free, unfortunately, but these are the deals that are being cut behind the scenes right now, is they're saying, okay, who do we want to hear more from? So we'll lessen the sentence or show leniency for some of the key players. We see Comey and McCabe throwing each other under the bus. I can't wait to see more of that. Obviously, that's the best part, because they really don't have any means to communicate now. Because all of their communication is getting monitored, whether they like it or not. And so they're going to be throwing each other under the bus, and it's just going to, based on the severity of the crime and, the sequence as the dominoes keep falling, CEOs, we see so many CEO resignations. There's just going to, I think that people should see that as there are a lot of gears turning, and some of the justice processes that have been stonewalled are now finally taking place. Mm-hmm. It's just, even just think about Harvey Weinstein, it's so stressful to think about how long all of this information has been available, what his entire conspiracy and all of the abuse. Finally, why did it take so long? Unbelievable that it took so long, but thank God at least it's finally happening. And I think we're going to see more of that. We already are. The indictments, there's indictments being unsealed. Basically daily, huge buzz across the web. So if people are paying attention to the actual news, the mainstream media is obviously doing anything they can to keep the story on things that don't matter.
Exactly. I don't know if you follow True Pundit, Zach, but there was a couple articles that are coming out late today that are of great interest and right in line with what you're talking about. Apparently, Andrew McCabe is seeking immunity, and he plans to rat on Comey with the FBI's handling of Clinton email probe. Frankly, all they really need to do is watch Sunday with Charles, and they're going to learn quite a lot about the mishandling of the email probe. These are guys who know a lot about it, and it's in a good sense for the people of the United States and people who are interested in justice. There may be a race now to see who is going to rat out who first.
That's right.
There was also this article here about Imran Awan. There was supposed to be a status hearing on his case in Washington, D.C. on Thursday morning at 10 a.m. That's now been postponed until July the 3rd. And in a personal conversation with Thomas Paine, he speculated that it might indicate that Mr. Awan is ready to roll over and sing like something that sings and tell people what he knows. So that would be very interesting. I think there is kind of this collective sense that the planets are aligning, the Clintons are weakening. Bill Clinton, of course, is now fearful of Laura Loomer, wouldn't even let her into the book signing today, earlier here in New York City. So that was really interesting. Hopefully we're at a point where we're going to all start to experience some sort of a massive sea change. So what's going to happen to Stefan Halper? Do we know?
I don't know. And, I think that, basically, there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, so it's hard to rule out what evidence there's grand juries seated already. It's hard to, know what's already being analyzed. We don't know, we're learning right now kind of about the real depth of London and the United Kingdom's involvement in this whole scandal is. Yeah. And that is a huge element of the scandal that, sometimes I just ignore it, because even I feel like I know too much sometimes. just even thinking about London's involvement in all this, it's like, okay, are you ready to throw up first? And then we can dig into that. So it's like, I don't know exactly that, you know, where he will fall in the row of dominoes. But fortunately, again, there's no hope for basically any of them ultimately. And so it does incentivize them to throw each other under the bus sooner. And
Right.
that is great. And we are already seeing that obviously at the top. So based on how the, criminal referrals come down in terms of who's witness to what and what actual crimes are being prosecuted from the leaks. There's all these different elements. So, I'm obviously just in favor of the sooner the better on everything. I think that a really big part of this is that there is an effort from both the mainstream media, obviously, but also from the general media that they're afraid that people are going to really realize how bad this is. And they do need to downplay it because basically people's worlds are going to completely be turned
Right.
upside down when
Right.
they realize all of these good people that they've been voting for Democrats all this time, putting on this hope and change face. That was just as big a lie as all their other lies. Hope and change was literally the opposite. It got worse how many times over? We didn't think it could get worse after W, and look what happened. Hope and change was like a calculated, just like their 50-50 public versus private position. Hope and change was their public
Right.
position, and they wanted to infiltrate the U.S. governments and corrupt it as deeply as possible. And it's going to be really, it's jarring to anyone really digging into this material. And I think the media is really trying to manage the image of the government that it's not so corrupt, because the more people find out about this, the more they're going to be really concerned.
And are you sensing that with your readers and your friends around there in Seattle? You brought up a great point. Even if people dislike Donald Trump, you should be very concerned that foreign intelligence services are being employed quite easily to spy on U.S. citizens and achieve political goals.
Yep, strictly political. And yeah, I think, I do feel like things are getting better in terms of like the general climate of people. Seattle's economy is good, so I know, it's been good for many years. People are getting jobs. There's people, people are having options with their jobs. So there is some, I've heard a lot of people talking about 401k health, people seem uplifted in general. Now, that's really making just the problems worse that there are. So, on the one hand, I think that people are a little bit alleviated from the stress of the election year. However, now we're kind of realizing that there are real roadblocks to achieving the local goals that we need to, with everyone stuck focused on national issues. We need to, there's just, and Shama Sawant here in Seattle is, one of these people who's on the ground doing so much of the bottom up work that so much of us who are analyzing from the top down, it's like, what could we be accomplishing for our own hometowns if we weren't just sitting about talking national politics this whole time? That's part of the reason I think that the mainstream media does focus on national politics, is it keeps people distracted from actually getting work done in their communities. And yeah, but I do think that people are being more civically engaged than they have in past years. And I think that's definitely a good thing. I just hope people feel more like we are all neighbors than the, the divisiveness that the mainstream media always needs to make you take a side and be on team so and so, and someone's winning and someone's losing. It's like most people can see that that's just an advertising strategy, but it really does infect people's well-being. It's just a toxic mindset, but I think it is improving. I've seen improvements.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also interesting how social media is bringing people together, and I feel like it's getting people more engaged in the political process because you're not locked into this corporate advertiser-driven agenda from the news that I just think that, I don't know what it is. It's like, you look at news from the 1960s or even entertainment programming in the 50s, 60s, 70s, they all have a sort of a feel. And maybe we've gotten to this point where as individuals, we're all media savvy enough, to the extent that people are, as we are right now, making our own broadcasts. People are seeking out independent broadcasts, and we can all share information in a way that's new and offers a lot more alternatives. But it also offers a lot of potential pitfalls. I mean, you know, we're talking about surveillance, we're talking about technology. It's interesting, I don't know if you got a chance to see this clip, but it just went up on Gateway Pundit. This is actually the clip of Laura Loomer being kicked out of the Bill Clinton event earlier, and it's pretty disturbing to me that independent journalists like you, like me, like Laura, I mean, they didn't even tell her why she was being thrown out. Quite obviously, someone had visually identified Laura Loomer, and they know her enough already to know that she was probably going to ask Bill Clinton something that he didn't want to hear. So they just threw her out. Now, I don't know the law. You see this guy in the background here, there's a Secret Service agent who is physically very big man, and he was directing, he seemed to be directed by a Bill Clinton staffer who then, backed up by a Secret Service agent, see him standing in the back there. This guy in the front of the frame, he's a Barnes & Noble security guy. So did the Secret Service throw her out? Did Barnes & Noble throw her out? This is sort of a mini version of what they're doing with GCHQ. Maybe the Secret Service isn't allowed to throw a U.S. citizen out of somewhere, but maybe Barnes & Noble has the ability to say, well, we're a private business, so we don't want you in here. And they're able to manipulate the law and dance around these restrictions that are designed to protect our freedom to achieve the goal they want, which is to get Laura the hell out of there, to get Trump impeached, or whatever it is that they're trying to do. It's pretty scary, Zach.
It is. Yep, it is. And as people like us who are just coming to like offer just normal human being commentary about this stuff, we're realizing how that's literally exactly why they create the media so scripted, is because they do not want the actual common person's observation. Because I'll tell you, if a lot of people had the opportunity to go Laura Loomer someone, they would. We don't have the opportunities to be able to be in the places where we need to call people out. You know, it's like, obviously, if you're showing up, you know, I don't know, Bill Clinton was doing a book tour. It's like, you know, I don't know what he expects, if he expects everyone to love his books only. You know, it's just seeing the censorship and how much they just don't want people to express themselves, and how much it's like shunned on the media to like be productively, you know, offering critiques to people who are elected leaders, especially corrupt ones. It's like, it just really exposes how much of a show the mainstream media is. And, you know, it's the Great Awakening, really, is people are really, really coming to terms with how far the rich entertainment and social engineers go to keep their world, the reality, whereas people are really wisening up.
Absolutely. I asked Bill Clinton if he had any insight into how Chris Gowan, his former assistant and currently Imran Awan's lawyer, how Chris Gowan got his hands on the damning, potentially, evidence of hacking that Laurel Everly and I turned over to the DC, or rather the U.S. Capitol Police, and he was pleased to say that he knew nothing about that. So Bill Clinton was having a rough day after some crappy comments about Monica Lewinsky.
Oh
that
my
guy
God, yeah.
he's like a walking PR nightmare.
He really is. It's like, and yeah, you know, he's just too stubborn to not take every chance he can get to be in the spotlight, even though every single time he just finds new rock bottom.
Yeah.
I'm glad even CNN was calling him out. I mean, fortunately, the Me Too culture has given a new veracity to people asking questions on that issue. And Bill Clinton, naive, so naive.
Well, we may be finally coming back around to some kind of a climate where perhaps Monica Lewinsky, I was thinking about this, and I was speaking with Laura after we left that event. You know, Monica Lewinsky, people called her a homewrecker, and some people say, well, she was a young girl. I mean, she was, and he was a much more powerful man. But the thing that's really troubling about it is, you know, Bill Clinton has, in the past 20 years, had a pretty, by most standards, productive and, from a professional standpoint, very successful life. Monica Lewinsky at 20 or I mean, how old is she now? But could you imagine her trying to date after that, trying to find a husband or a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever she might have been looking for? She was the butt of every single joke. And if she could find a man to date her, she's got to be thinking, well, did this guy see the Barbara Walters interview with all the lip gloss, and what exactly does he have in mind? It really created a terrible situation for this woman and affected the whole course of her life. Bill Clinton, not so much, but he thinks he was the victim.
It's unbelievable, and she's not the only one. And it's really just contrary to anyone going to work and having their basic sexual harassment training. Like, anyone who has had any work experience probably has been told that if at the office anything romantic is pretty much inappropriate, especially between managers and their subordinates.
Right.
There are laws to protect subordinates from that type of abusive, manipulative behavior. Right. And so for anyone to think that just because he's president, he's exempt from the basic concept of you can't sexually harass employees at the workplace, it's like, this is basic stuff. And just the way he reacts, and just this entitlement that they can just get away with it, like there was some consent on her part or anything, it's just so far beyond just the basic ethics, basic professionalism. And we see a lot of this where people try to, we get a lot of these kind of guys being called out for sexually abusive or manipulative behavior towards women, and they get in these kind of emotional pleas, trying to beg for forgiveness or react to the issue in a way that doesn't actually look at what the exact crime they committed was. And it's important that people know what these crimes are, that there are workplace protections for women and people, everyone, from sexual harassment, that there are laws in place. If there aren't laws in place, we talk about them. And it's just like everything about the Lewinsky scandal, that people try and water it down in any way. It's just the most classic abuse of power of a manager in the possible way. The president of the United States having a much younger intern. I mean, it's just, you don't need to explain it to anyone in common sense how inappropriate that was. Do we want to respect the leaders of this country? Would we expect them to actually be professional, or at least slightly professional, as to not go that far?
I mean, it just seems like there's an amazing double standard as well. I feel like if Donald Trump did anything remotely close to this, he would just be ground into the dirt, and like you'd never hear from him again. Whereas Bill Clinton, I mean, there were all these young women working for Bill Clinton. He's still married to Hillary. His daughter is out there. It's like, there's been like, no, the guy is just brazenly unapologetic. It's quite crazy.
Well, and the other thing that stresses me out about that is that this is how part of, basically the entire swamp, they're all connected by the need to be staving off sexual harassment allegations. Literally, this is one of many. Bill and Hillary Clinton both know the business process around keeping the victims silenced, shaming them. This is not just these one-off cases where they're just looking the other way. Obviously, we saw with Harvey Weinstein. We've seen in so many ways where the media and the politicians, they're using taxpayer money to silence the victims of their sexual harassment. So this is a business in the, both Democrat and Republican parties. Right. Sexual harassment lawsuits are so common that the Clintons are literally probably leaders in the U.S. government from that standpoint, is that, if you have to figure out how to deal with a situation like this, Clintons are your disaster relief experts, because look at the history of Bill Clinton, look at his victims, and look at what Hillary Clinton has done to make their lives worse too.
It does seem like the Clintons laid out some templates for some pretty scary stuff, and we're seeing it sort of all unravel now. And you also got to remember, Bill Clinton's presidency, when it began in 1993, essentially, the internet was not readily available. We did not have essentially supercomputers in everybody's pocket. And now that not only the average person has this technology, all these agencies, we've got Stroke and Page texting each other, and the FBI is spying, and people are intercepting texts. It's unbelievable the number of ways that our lives can be disrupted. and our online lives, we see in even just in the video forms that we're dealing with here, the troll comments, the people starting fake accounts, smear campaigns, and obviously Cheryl Atkinson wrote the book The Smear, and I think right now I'm experiencing like the Smear 2.0. So it's interesting to see how these techniques, like the made-up story about Donald Trump and how that becomes this investigation with Mueller, and how it expands into everything. And it really is very, I'm seeing analogs in what's happening over here. And Zach, people are asking me if Bill Clinton looked healthy. He did look healthy. Listen, Bill is a personable guy, He looked me in the eyes, he shook my hand, he said hello, he was conversational. Hillary, and I'm not saying this to be insulting or to crack on her at all, she had a dead glaze over her eyes that I have only ever seen. I had a friend in college who had a heroin problem. And I remember I met him one time at a Taco Bell at a very low moment, and he had this kind of unnatural kind of like just haze. And I'm not saying that Hillary was on heroin, it didn't look quite like that, but she looked like glass eyes, fake hair. It was just bizarre, and she was not friendly. Bill was friendly, so it's weird, this guy's done all this terrible stuff, but he's obviously got this charm to him. I believe that is a characteristic of a psychopath, isn't it?
I'm no psychologist, but yeah, they're both not well, obviously, to have, they consider themselves doing public service when they're, responsible for the most, it's hard to think of people who have accomplished more harm caused to society than them. Yeah. And yeah, you're right. Bill Clinton, that was what people always said about him, was that he was very charismatic, and he was the first Democrat Republican, so he could be the best of both worlds, people pleaser. They really combed Hillary to try and be the first woman president as part of their whole scheme to abuse pardons and power as much as possible as a couple. But
well,
I do
that's
feel like
another point that you've just raised. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we were talking about the templates that the Clintons have laid out, not only how to silence victims and things like that, but I was just thinking about this. When Bill Clinton was president, I don't think too many people had this idea that, oh, Hillary's going to run for president. She was really sort of just another first lady. But the Clintons have now laid out this template that it does seem like the Obamas are sort of getting in line to duplicate. Bill has this foundation, the Bill Clinton Foundation, which if you're like, I don't know, the king of Morocco or the king of Saudi Arabia, and you want to get some stuff done, you just funnel some cash into the Clinton Foundation, and then when Hillary becomes president or Secretary of State or whatever, things might go your way. So we've got this Barack Obama Foundation currently being built there in Chicago, and it sure seems like Michelle is going to be a candidate for the Democratic Party at some time in the future, if not 2020.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why, in my opinion, it's so important that this gets vetted fast, because these people need to be held accountable, and the sooner they can get to election season, the more is going on. It's harder to get the Department of Justice to produce the investigations they need to as fast as they can. Especially slows down obviously during elections, and we see so much stonewalling now to try and help the Democrats for midterms this year. But yeah, exactly. And I think most people do have their eyes on the Obamas and the foundation, and obviously their Netflix deal. I'm glad there was so much backlash to that, because that obviously was as clear of a just consolation prize as they could find for themselves to keep him out of the news as this scandal unfolds. But I don't think that his brand is going to be very valuable for very much longer here.
But I think it could be more insidious than that. You see, they've realized the power of media. The fact that you and I can create a video and send our message out to thousands of people, I think a lot more people are aware of Barack Obama than either you or I, of course. And if they can be producing shows and movies, I mean, this is very powerful persuasion, and people are really watching that kind of stuff quite a lot. I want to bring you back to something you said earlier about Boeing and the changing environment there in Seattle. And I know you were a Bernie Sanders supporter, as was I early on. Something that I learned from my friend Jan Weinberg, who does a show here called The Audacity Files, is that Bernie actually received pretty significant contributions from Boeing, several of them actually. This might not be all of them, but Bernie was made aware that the Boeing Corporation had emails between Hillary Clinton's State Department and the Clinton Foundation and Boeing. And when he said, nobody cares about your damn emails, he was kind of possibly playing a role. I think that Bernie was never expected to win. And when people say that Bernie was a sellout, I don't know if I agree with that. I think that Bernie may have been manipulated, Bernie may have been given no choice, or he may have been complicit all along, but it doesn't seem like there was ever any possible chance for Bernie to do anything other than make it look like a fight. The other guy I was surprised to find out about being in cahoots with the military-industrial contractor was Trey Gowdy, somebody I think we all enjoyed seeing bark at Hillary Clinton. But Charles Ortel brought up the good point. Did he find out what happened in Benghazi? Did he find out what happened to the emails? It seems like no. Yep. and of course, you know, that Boeing plant moved to South Carolina, didn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, and I haven't studied that company in particular. I mean, it's just like, you know, this is just part of the map. You just look at all of the Clinton Foundation donors, and they're basically all on the list. They've all got their relationships that they've been building. Yeah, and Bernie, you know, I'm glad, you know, he's got his own issues, and I think his brand is dying. And I think that, fortunately, part of what the Bernie revolution did was show us how many people are aware of what's going on and were ready to use the movement that Bernie Sanders offered as a vehicle to do that. I thought that was the most inspiring thing, is that there were so many people that knew who Bernie was, even though he was a relatively little known politician before this year, or 2016. You know, obviously, I agree, we're not really sure to what extent he was in on it. He probably, you know, I'll conjecture in full in a piece coming up once I finish it, so I won't, you know, get too deep into it. But, you know, fortunately, I do think it was, you know, if he got pushed over by the Clintons before the primary even began, then obviously he wouldn't have been able to do anything to change the Obama administration. So they just got him out of the way sooner, to however they did. And I'm just so glad the Clinton machine was stopped in general. I love that meme. The meme is amazing. That has pictures of Bernie on the top and a picture of Trump on the bottom. The top says, "We wanted a fine-tooth comb. Fuck it, we'll use a hammer." It's just like, you know, I think that the inspiration of all the people who were activists and came out for Bernie Sanders, that's still alive. As long as it's being used, that feels good. You know, I don't think that he really has much of a future in politics. I think that he will probably get reelected this year, but I don't think that he's even going to run in 2020. But we see a lot of people have poured money into advertising for him and having Bernie Sanders bots on the internet now barking at you if you say anything negative about Bernie. So we know he's at least they poured some money into trying to keep his image alive after the election. But it's just like, you know, people, it's just like, how dumb do they think we are? It's like, we literally supported Bernie because he was calling out corruption, and then he endorsed corruption. Did they think we were just going to all of a sudden be fine with corruption when Bernie said it was okay? It's like, how, you know.
Well, I think they think
it's just so naive.
Most people aren't even paying attention. And actually, one of the most interesting things that you told me in our previous conversation that is, I think, really kind of exemplifies one of the most important things to come out of the 2016 election is that I think a lot more people have become engaged in the political process through social media. And you spoke about how you had put up a tweet that if you're going to donate a penny for everybody who retweets to Bernie Sanders, and it's, that's a new type of activism where, you were able to use your platform, your pretty substantial platform, to reach a lot of people. And for those who aren't following you, it's Zach Haller, at Zach Haller on Twitter there, and you're on Periscope as well. Of course, Medium, people can read your writing there. Zach, how can people support your work? This is your full-time gig, right?
No, not at all. No, this is just, I literally just write in my spare time. When I'm thinking, I literally kind of just became my, I had to take my notes to figure out what I'm reading, and so I started just writing it. So this is just a hobby. If people want to subscribe to my content, I have a private Facebook group where we do a lot of really amazing research, and there's some gossip, just enough to keep things interesting. So that's an incentive for people who subscribe to my Patreon. So I would invite people to do that. How
do they find that? What's the URL for that?
It should be Zach Haller, so patreon.com/Zach Haller. At the bottom of all of my Medium articles, I have a link in there. So, I think that, I think that I appreciate the fact that I have the time to write, and that I read basically all of the WikiLeaks emails when they came out in the month of October. And so I feel like I should be writing about things because I learned a lot during that period. I like that I have time to do it on my own. I don't, ideally, if I get a job writing professionally, it'd be for Family Guy or some funny show. But basically, all the places that I'd ever end up writing are, cable controlled. So it's not really that likely. Maybe Roseanne Barr will hire me to write for her at some point. That's what I'm looking at this point.
And I'm sorry to take you all over the place, but you just mentioned WikiLeaks, and that's something that I think a lot of our viewers are interested in. What's going on, first of all, there's been a lot of stuff about Julian Assange. Do we know what's going on with him? And why the hell has Kim.com not given us any information? It's been over a year. He was barking about all this stuff. Nothing has come out of Kim.com.
Yeah, that's a real mystery. And there's a lot to speculate on, and obviously we are seeing all these different types of abuses of the press and the silencing of whistleblowers to different extents. And it's a weird situation with all of the with the Kim.com element. I think that it's important to remember that basically the Trump administration did kind of set the legal precedent to pardon Julian Assange in months ago. They basically made a statement about WikiLeaks confirming that, basically kind of opening the door that Julian would eventually be safe. So I think that that's the most important thing to rely on right now. There's obviously so many other factors in play, and we're seeing the scariest stuff we've ever seen out of the United Kingdom right now. So,
You mean in terms of the spying on citizens in the United States?
That and Tommy, the Free Tommy situation,
yes,
and
of course. How could I forget?
I'm hoping for, just people need to keep researching and keep, speaking out for Julian and for all of the journalists and whistleblowers. Obviously, there's a lot going on right now, and hopefully there's more going on behind the scenes with Julian than we know. We have no evidence of that, really. So, basically hoping for some kind of public appearance if he can come to the door. But who knows what's going on since he's been in the solitary confinement. So, but there's just a lot of really mixed media on it. So it's so stressful to try and really figure out what's happening.
It really is astounding. I mean, we're looking at images of Julian Assange and Tommy Robinson, and these are guys who are just, stuck in a hole. We never hear from them again. Tommy Robinson has been arrested many times, and so they just, they say, oh, well, this guy's got a record. He's got a rap sheet. Well, this goes back to the same, make up a story about hookers in Moscow and then say, oh, well, now there's a record of that. But if they've taken Tommy Robinson and raided his mother's house 5 times without justification and thrown him in jail 3 or 4 times without justification, does that now justify throwing him in jail again? And why has Kim.com not come forward with any of this information about Seth Rich? We haven't heard anything more about Seth Rich's murder, still no autopsy, still nothing, no investigation by the DC Metro Police. It's just absolutely bizarre.
Yeah, it's so hard to keep track of everything. So I'm sure this is the daily struggle for you. Is just like, we get a new tip of new iceberg every day,
Yeah.
and nothing is what it seems anyway.
Right.
So it's, I think that it's just all this big part on the kind of just silencing of the opposition that was part of this, this oppressive structure that was trying to take the will of the American people away from them. So much of what the fascist elements we see in society is suppression of the opposition. What happened to Roseanne, what happens to Tommy, what happens to Julian. This is a pattern. It's not casual. It's a pattern of, silencing the opposition. And everyone, there's just different places that it's happening, and it needs to be addressed in different ways. But I do think it's getting better. So as much as I like to understand how scary it is, right, I don't want to be under a storm cloud, because I do think that there is a new kind of, more people are following the rules now, and that a lot less corruption is happening and a lot less corruption is starting. So I do think that people should, maintain a cautious optimism that while we're still seeing really scary things happening, basically all of it is kind of rising to the surface, and that's more than we can say from 2 years ago. So right. I try to stay really positive about it.
Yeah, well, that's a good attitude. And I think that, again, maybe it's this better engagement through social media. Maybe more people are aware. The last thing I want to ask you about, and this is quite far afield from other stuff we've been talking about, but of course, you've been an advocate for gay rights, and we've spoken about that in some of our previous conversations. There was just this Supreme Court decision that came down the other day. What do you think about them deciding in favor of the Colorado baker that did not want to bake a wedding cake for a same-sex couple?
I thought it was good that it happened this way. It's a, layered issue. I'm openly gay, for people who didn't know that, but just on the record. So, something that gay men see in the day-to-day life is that gay bars, there are bachelorette parties very often. And so we're seeing this dispute play out in a different way, where, what do private businesses, what right do they have to, cater to a certain clientele? Some bars are saying no bachelorette parties here whatsoever, for example. So all of these different types of cases are going to get, they're going to come to fruition in the cities and the states where it's happening. And every city is dealing with their own transition towards full marriage equality and full equity for LGBT Americans. Every state is moving in their same direction. I'm in the interest, again, of privacy and the interest of small businesses and entrepreneurs being able to have as few restrictions as possible. If there were to be some type of precedent that is forcing, it's just such a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Obviously, this if you look into the specifics of this suit, there is some ambiguity in terms of, a lot of lawsuits, is what we saw with the DNC fraud lawsuit. A lot of lawsuits, you really have to thread the needle, right, depending on what the outcome you want is. So, there may be a similar case where we see a different outcome, where there's a more sweeping ruling. That's what I'm saying is, the more independence and autonomy Americans have to run their businesses in a way that's obviously not discriminatory. It's obviously illegal in different ways to discriminate against people. Local laws should be looked at on the state and city basis. Every state has their own LGBT laws or not. And so these issues that get kind of blown up in the media as, oh, you're either for gay rights or you're not for gay rights. It's like, if you're actually for gay rights, then you're looking at this issue and arguing it in a way that's good for the goose and good for the gander. You're not just saying because you support gay rights, you support
forcing this person to make a cake. Yeah.
Right. It's, and I think most people do understand this, that this is a nuanced issue, and, most people want the best. In my experience, most people want the best for other people that they know.
Right.
And this is part of the media's effort to make people have to take a side, to make it a divisive story.
Exactly.
And it's like, I'm just so allergic to that. I think most people are too. And, obviously, I don't know how many people are having conversations about, like, the privacy and, rights of a business owner, state to state. People are having that type of mind bend conversation all over the place because of this. Is it based on what they actually know, or is it based on what the arguments that are being floated in the media? The media plays like we're so stupid. In my experience, most people see all through their games and, would understand the complexity of this. I'm happy to hear the best argument for the opposition in this case, but, I think that it was the right ruling and that businesses should have, more autonomy. Obviously, states should have discrimination laws based on what the needs are in their state, so nobody's getting discriminated anywhere. Right. But it's not an easy thing. You just need to say, all businesses should serve to all clientele, period. That's the type of restrictive court ruling that I think would create more problems than solutions.
Right. And it's a really interesting analysis, too, because here's a story about a wedding cake, and I've been hearing about this for, God knows how long. Meanwhile, Tommy Robinson's life is being destroyed, and he's stuck in a jail cell, and we've heard many stories of people who've been wrongfully imprisoned, people who've been spied on, even Laura Loomer having her First Amendment rights. I don't believe the Constitution says you've got a protected right to purchase a cake. A cake is a pretty unnecessary item, and frankly, if I went into, like, let's say a Nazi bakery and they said, we're not making any Jew wedding cakes, I wouldn't want to buy a cake from there anyway. I just go someplace else and get a different cake.
It's like you see these signs when you go into restaurants, bars all the time. It says, we reserve the right to refuse business to anyone.
Right.
It's like, I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing to have if you serve the public, is a sign that says, look, if you're not being a respectful customer, we don't need to serve you.
Right.
And, where do you draw the line of giving that person, the right, to refuse? Most people aren't going to, there's not going to be any trouble with any of the diverse customers that they're going to have in their line of business. People get into what they do because they want to do it, and they want people to appreciate their products and be good customers. However, it's basically an impossible slope to say, every business can't exercise the right to refuse service to someone.
Well, and then at what point do we decide that, hey, it's okay for Barnes & Noble to throw Laura Loomer out because she's Laura Loomer, or because she's right-wing, or because she's conservative, or whatever? So it is a slippery slope. It's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah, and those, the whole Loomer situation, I'll have to look into the specifics, but it's just like, so much of those events are like image management events to begin with. And so it's like, it is a little bit more understandable that they want their crowd to be, it's like everyone going to the Oprah show wears colorful shirts so the audience looks pretty, it's like, that's all part of that. So
they don't want people walking up and screaming in Bill Clinton to make them feel bad.
I don't know why they put him on a public tour right now.
Terrible.
I obviously know he wants to sell this book, whatever, but
the book seems idiotic to me. The president is missing. It's a fiction book. It's like, really? You know what, Zach? I think they do it to distract. Like James Comey went on the book tour, and these guys are out there just like nothing's wrong. Everything's
whistling
great.
Past the graveyard.
Yeah,
exactly.
Kick Laura out, and at the James Comey thing, she just stood up and she was like, "Hey, Comey, you're gonna get locked up." It just like threw her out.
Yeah. Well, and it's in local politics, a lot of times you'll see similar things where you'll have a local meeting, city council, school board, what have you, and you have a disgruntled citizen, and it's it obviously there's a lot of things to be upset about, and I don't even know what we're like making a point or anything here, but it's hopefully people have the right to air all of their grievances, and not get their rights trampled on. But really it's kind of stressful to think about how few rights we have at this point with how much censorship is going on and how many mainstream voices are just getting demonetized, taken off YouTube. Jordan Sather, it's like, it's just,
I got an issue with Jordan because he's down with Robert David Steele, but we don't have to talk about that right now.
I'm sure you oppose his censorship,
I am opposed to censorship, but I'd have to look
Yeah.
into that a bit more because I think there might be something else going on there. Someone who I frequently see bashing me elsewhere does raise the good point that we haven't discussed Dinesh D'Souza, and he's another guy that Obama railroaded through in jail. Zach, you and
Yep.
I have so much to talk about. I definitely want to have you back sooner. We
Yeah.
shouldn't have such a big gap in between our conversations. And I want to remind people to follow you on Twitter at Zach Haller, not Haller.
There you go.
Haller.
Nice.
He's the shirtless pundit. He's on there on Twitter. You can join his private Facebook group if you want to get the latest information and get in on some of the gossip. Definitely check out his article on Medium about the expanding Spygate scandal. He does a great job of explaining it. Zach, I really appreciate you taking the time to join me tonight, and I hope that I will see you again soon, my friend. Have a very good evening.
Nice.
Anything else you
Nice
want to share
chatting.
before we sign out?
No, hey to everybody, follow me. I got a lot of really cool, nice, smart people off of your following last time, so
Good.
hey to everyone, and thanks for having me, and we'll chat again soon.
Excellent, Zach. Thanks very much. Have a great night, and I'll see everybody tomorrow.